What it is, what is up? Welcome back to my channel. It's a wrap, aka Yudi here. And in this video, I'm joined with the lovely Miss Malcolm Hughes, and we are discussing Where Sleeping Girls Lie by Farida Abike Iyumede. I'm so excited for y'all to get into this discussion that we had because it was lovely. And if you've already read Where Sleeping Girls Lie, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm super interested. I feel like we touched on a lot of different themes throughout the book, and I'm very interested on what you all's perspective is as well. So let me not waste any time. Let's get right into it.
Today we're going to discuss the book Where Sleeping Girls Lie by Farida Abike Iyumede. And Udi, do you want to tell us a little bit of like what the book's about?
So the Where Sleeping Girls Lie follows this character Sade, and now an orphan pretty much. She's lost her father, her mother, and now she's enrolling in Alfred Nobel Prep, this preparatory school. And her first day there, she meets her roommate Elizabeth, and then Elizabeth goes missing.
For sure. And so
So
then we're on this journey. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, we're on this journey. That's it. We're on this journey. What happened to Elizabeth?
Exactly. Yeah, so it's a wild ride from there. But one thing I do want to point out at the onset is just Farida opens it up with her introduction saying that she dedicates this book part into women like Toyin. And Toyin is actually short for Oluwatoyin Salu, who was someone who was Nigerian American. She lived here in Tallahassee, Florida, and she was an active participant in the Black Lives Matter protests during the time. And then one day she tweeted out that she had been sexually assaulted. And then a couple of days after she tweeted that, she ended up going missing. And then subsequently, a few days later, her body was found and she was found deceased. And so what I think she meant, and we see that a little bit in how this plays out, is for women and girls who've been assaulted or attacked and had like no safe space and no one to really depend on. And I was thinking through, like, did we see this pop up in the book? Because we did see at the time for Toyin, we did see the internet kind of rally behind her and cry for how women aren't protected within not only the Black Lives Matter movement, but just all civil rights and social movements that we've seen. And so it was more of a cry for like the protection of women while they're on the front lines and just in general. So I was just wanted us to think through if you felt like that was something that showed up in our work here and like how that might have influenced how Farida told the story.
Yeah, I mean Elizabeth's character is really close to Toyin's
Yeah.
story, just in terms of how Sade's character meets her and then she disappears. And I don't want to give away the end, but I mean there is a little bit more hope in the ending in terms of Farida's telling of this story versus Toyin's actual story. A big theme, I think, in Where Sleeping Girls Lie is definitely, these students having a voice. And I don't want to I don't want to get too deep because I know we're going to get into the review, but I'm thinking of
Yeah.
specifically Baz, or Basil's
Mm-hmm.
character, and
Yeah.
how he was just like, I don't, no one's listening to me, but I know something is wrong.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and especially Tony being a young person, and these are young people, I see a lot of ties.
Absolutely. Same. I found it one thing, I know we'll talk about some more, but just I found it not really surprising because it happens, but just how much was going on that like adults knew nothing about, right? It's like kids often, and just thinking back to being a teenager, just like some of the flexibilities or things that you get into, and like just adults feel like they're on top of it and they're missing so much. And then like sometimes dire, really traumatic things can happen in that gap between what they think they know versus what's really happening. And I feel like that played out a lot here. And unfortunately in Toyin as well, and just like how many people fall through that gap. Adults feel like they're doing enough, but how many young folks are actually unprotected.
Yeah, and I don't want to compare her first work, Ace of Spades, too much to wear
Yeah.
sleeping girls live.
Yeah.
But I can't help it. I can't help it when it comes to
We have
Ace
to.
between.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do love how she is able to like tie in like institutions, and
Hmm.
how like with institutions that there's this that in trying to like keep up with like traditions, or trying to keep the facade that everything is functioning the way it should be functioning, how
Yeah.
much harm it inflicts on people.
Yeah. And just how many complicit adults there always are
Yeah,
too.
the complicity.
This one more so than the first one, right? Not to compare the two, but this one, yeah, even more so than Ace of Spades. You just had a lot of adults who are willing to like overlook a lot as long as they benefited. All right. So let's start with the pros, right? So like what did you like about the book? Like what were your feelings? And we could talk through any questions that you have as well. Just yeah, you're like what did you like about the book?
Yeah, I did love Sade's character, even though there was the running thing that she brings bad luck
Yeah.
in bad situations everywhere she goes. But I did appreciate like her ability to navigate like situations, especially
Mhm.
like in terms of friendships and like getting information. And I just appreciate her as like a sleuth. You don't really get that. I don't think you really
Yeah.
get that a lot with um especially black female characters.
Yeah.
So the fact that she's like sitting here and like piecing things together, I really loved Sade's character for that. And also again comparing it to Ace of Spades, not uh like she's able to say things like as they are, like she there's no like nervousness or anything about it, like no. Like I specifically in thinking of her relationship with Jude, and how
Mhm.
she navigates that relationship, and how she's still quite like almost in like a scary way is able to maintain like I'm not crossing this line with you.
Yeah. I agree. I think one thing for me was the writing. I liked how we started with the mystery because it's supposed to be like a thriller, right? Like I remember noting the initial line, which is the world was silent when she drowned. I thought that was so good because I had no idea where the story was going to go. I was like, what does that mean? Even though I had read the synopsis. Um, but I know you said you really like Sade's character. And I like Sade too. But there was parts where like I was curious about whether or not eventually it comes out, right? But I was like whether or not Sade had like a dark history that she was hiding. Right. So I found myself wondering, like, can I trust Sade like fully? Like, is there something deeper and darker here that she's not like alluding to? Especially when people would come up to her and be like, "You look familiar. Do I know you?" And she's like, "You don't know me." And I was like, "Okay." Like, what's the background there? But I agree.
That's
Just like,
true.
yeah, a lot of the different characters were interesting. But yeah, Sade, I was giving her a side eye for a little bit for sure.
Yeah, and I will say, like, when we find out Sade's secret, I love how there she was able to tie it in Farida with like I don't want to say Nigerian like folklore, but like those, gosh, what's the word?
Yeah, not like folklore, but like I guess superstitions. Would you say?
Superstitions, yes.
Yeah.
She was
Yeah,
able to
yeah.
tie that in with like Nigerian like superstition, and I was just like, oh, that's a really nice way of like folding that in into the story. I thought that was a nice touch. But there was a lot of like different characters and things going on,
Yeah.
and I did appreciate how it seemed like every character had like this full story. Like I didn't feel like anyone got left on the back burner.
I would agree with that. I do feel like we have really well thought out and well rounded characters. Some I liked more and less than others, obviously. Some were surprising. Like, how did you feel about the unholy trinity? Like, did you have any thoughts about them or just the way that she presented them? Like, did it shift throughout the book or did it impact how you read the story? Just like, what was the influence there at all, if any at all?
Yeah. So I when we initially got the books, and Fruita was talking about how she was inspired by Mean Girls, I was coming in thinking that were potentially going to be unredeemable characters. But specifically April, how April in the beginning, I'm just like, oh, she has to be like the most terrible person. Like she has to be the mastermind behind all of this, and the way that her character comes around and how we come to understand why like she navigates the way that she does. I thought like April was so within the dynamic of the three of them was so well done. I'll also say the same for Persephone, because like in the beginning we think that she's very cold and closed off, but the way that like we come to learn like her story and like her own experience at the academy or at the preparatory school. In the beginning, I saw them as very like I guess shallow, but the way that by the end they had so much depth was very
Yeah.
I was like she did that.
I agree. I really ended up really liking Persephone's character, and I thought that I was going to dislike her at the beginning. Just the way she was interacting in the class, I thought she was unnecessarily cold. And then also just the other two girls as well, right? Just the unholy trinity and how they all were together. But Persephone ended up being a favorite of mine. April, honestly, I don't know if I liked her more by the end of the story. I don't. Juliet, I did end up like liking her. I thought they were all well written. But I guess my question for you, as well as Persephone, but then also April, did you see any of their stories playing out the way they did? I felt like there was a little bit of foreshadowing, but you have to be paying attention. But I'm just curious if you picked up on it.
I didn't actually. I was really surprised by the way things turned around for April, even though we kind of knew that Elizabeth and her had, this connection of previously being roommates, but I wasn't very sure how that connection was going to be made, like throughout the story. And Persephone, was I surprised by Persephone, or did I have any idea? I don't think I did. I don't think I did for any of them. There was, I think when we get into like part 2 of the book, like when we get to the end of part 1, that's when I was really like, oh my gosh, I wasn't expecting this at all. I think the only character, sorry to jump out of like April and Persephone, I forget their group's name, but August was one that I wasn't really I feel like what we thought it was at the beginning was how I feel like it kind of rolled out at the end. So
Yeah, August was I don't I don't know if I saw the way it played out for August. That is someone who I know Sade had mixed feelings about him, but I liked August. Like, so the way that things ended up playing out was a little disappointing. Who I never liked was Jude.
oh yeah.
It's just, some people just like try too hard. And I know he was like the school's golden boy, but he was always suspect. I don't know if I saw it going where it went. So yeah, I guess that was, well, I guess we'll talk about it a little bit later if it was effectively done. Because I saw what she was trying to do and I saw what she did. But I think also circling back to what you said about Mean Girls, I felt like the first book had more Mean Girls. This one I ended up saying, hold on, I said that this one reminded me of Pretty Little Liars, Riverdale, and Criminal Minds. Like if you took those three shows and you put them together, I felt like that was this.
I guess
Huh?
the first one is more like a Gossip Girl vibe. I think it's that
Mm,
dark academia-esque, like
yeah.
we're in.
No, yeah, but it definitely gave me Pretty Little Liars, and then Riverdale with all of their, like you were saying, sleuthing and trying to figure it out. But all three of those are shows that I love, so I wasn't mad at it in any way. I will say about that though, and I don't know if you feel the same. Though I enjoyed this book and I enjoyed the first one, I don't want Farida to end up getting pigeonholed into just like this type of genre, unless she wants to. But I do remember reading this and thinking like the next book from her, I would like for it to be something different.
Yeah, what genre would you be interested to see her dibble and dabble in next?
Okay, so honestly, maybe a romance book, and I know that's like kind of left field, but because at one point I was scared that she was queer baiting in this book, and I won't say like which characters, but I was like, if nothing happens between these two characters, I'm gonna be pissed because she definitely queer baited them the whole time. But then she saw it through, so then it felt organic. And I would like, I think she does a good job of like slow burn and building up the intensity. So I was like, if she dedicated an entire book to that, I would read it.
Yeah, I could see it. And then also in this book, I'm also not gonna say the couple that were, but there was like a couple connections. I was just thought like, is it gonna end up going this way or
Yeah.
I think there's like three that she was like it could potentially go somewhere, but one of them was definitely not gonna go anywhere. But
Mm. Which one? Oh, now I want to know. I'm like, which characters did you not see having a future?
Jude. But
Oh, no, that one for sure. That one for
yeah,
sure.
Jude. But I was like,
Yeah,
maybe
had
she
no
could end up
future.
with August. You didn't think she could end up with
I
August?
did. I wanted them initially, like when she first got to the school and they had that organic like connection with swimming. I did want to see it, but once he did that thing without her consent, it kind of like because I didn't feel like it was enough chemistry there for that. I was like, I don't know if she invited
No.
that in, you know. So for me, yeah, that kind of put me off August a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree, but and I think initially, like when they first meet in the pool, I'm just like, oh, okay, maybe this is
it was
gonna
cute.
be.
It was cute. It was, and now that circle back to Gossip Girl, that did have like a little bit of like, mm, he was giving Nate at first. Remember Nate from Gossip Girl? Like
Oh yeah, I
just like
remember Nate.
he was giving Nate, so
Yeah,
it was cute at first. It was, yeah.
yeah,
I'll give you that. It
yeah, but it kind
was.
of did give me at least the dynamic with Sade, Basil, and Elizabeth from when they were all together. It was kind of giving like Mean Girls in that aspect, like their relationship, and then Elizabeth had this relationship with April that we don't really know what exactly happened. that that now they're no longer friends, and she's like in that it circle. And I think that's probably as far as it goes in terms of like how I felt like, oh, this is kind of giving me girls and the dynamics.
Thinking through that, like just some of the surprise elements. Do you feel like you saw Sade's background being what it is? Or were you like genuinely surprised?
I was surprised.
Okay.
And I may have missed like that she alluded to it in the
Mhm.
beginning when she was kind of because in the beginning she kind of talks about her like her family dynamic before she ends up at the school. But when it takes the turn that it takes, I was kind of like taken off guard, like, oh, okay.
I was expecting for her to have a relative. I didn't expect for it to be what it was, though, because I remember when she was thinking back on their trip to Paris, and the way that she was expressing it, saying like us and the parents were talking. So I was like, oh, there was someone here. Now, I also didn't necessarily connect that to the person or the ghost that kept showing up and like
Yeah, I didn't.
stalking her. I thought that something I thought that Sade would have had a direct cause in something happening to that person. And so that's what I expected. So like I didn't expect it to play out the way it did.
Yeah, I agree. I thought, especially because, I mean, granted, I can see how it could still affect you to the fact that you wouldn't ever want to like do that activity or whatever was related to that again. But I don't know why I was expecting like, oh, it could have been maybe like her swim mate or something like that. Um, or
Yeah.
like maybe like a relative.
I thought it was
But
her
yeah,
swim instructor or something. Yeah, like yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
you
yeah.
apart like they always talk about how she was like really dedicated to swimming, but I mean honestly, okay, one because my mind's going multiple places. The first thing is that I really I really liked all the water metaphors, like the one that she said that her sister will always say, like if you can't like swim, it's okay to like float or I guess like tread water, like just keeping afloat, like that metaphor. I was like, ooh, yeah, it really it was something I highlighted. I was like, oh, I really like that. But then number two, like in terms of Sade and just her connection to swimming, I kind of wish there was more. Like, I mean, granted, like I think some of the like the whole big scene that explains exactly what happened to Elizabeth, it does take place in, granted, there's no water in it, but like the pool, and also the big incident with her sister involves like water and swimming, I guess. But we like they always bring up like how she was this big swimmer, but I don't really feel like it really goes anywhere in the book. Apart from that's where August and her meet.
Yeah. No, that's a valid point. Because everything is swimming and swimming, like swimmer related with Michael Phelps and all these things. So I do agree. Like I feel like I wish that Sade would have joined the swim team earlier and we would have gotten to like experience her in that competitive nature of swimming. Right. Even though I do think that Farida did a good job of when Sade was in the water describing how exhilarating and like freeing it felt for her. So I think like in that part she was very descriptive and did it well.
Yeah, that's
So
a good point.
yeah.
Oh, I really did. I wanted to talk about Sade's dad.
I was just looking at a note from him, but go ahead.
Throughout the book, she doesn't like she goes in like a little bit on the dynamics with her father. And
Yeah.
also I may have missed it, but I don't know if it was very clear what exactly happened to like I know he passes away and she's all like, oh, he overworked himself or something like that.
Yeah.
Or is it because of the death of, not only his wife, which doesn't seem like that also it seems like iffy in the story.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but like the death of his wife and his other
Yeah.
daughter seems to like he just never seems to be the same. But also uh Sade doesn't seem to very much like her father. Like like there's just a small bit in the book when like she talks about looking down and like her father being there and I was just like, "Oh, is he trying to insinuate that her father's in hell?" Like
That's so interesting because that's not how I read it at all. So I did read it as him dying of like stress and a broken heart, but because his two favorite people died, like he didn't really rock with Sade at all for whatever reasons. Like I feel like that was unfair. The way that like her entire family was just like, "You're the rotten seed," and I did like how she rooted that, like you were saying, in Nigerian like superstition and folklore of like there are these twins, and like one twin is the one who's the evil twin, and how that was just relegated to Sade for whatever reasons. But then like the dad, I just felt like he had his two favorite people, the mother and the other sister, and then when they died, he just like kind of tapped out and no longer wanted to like live. But I didn't view it as her like hating her father. I actually feel like she secretly wanted his love. And so I feel
mm.
like it was still a yearning. And that's why he was still like popping up and around. Because she still desired that. Obviously, she had a better relationship with her mother, but I very much felt like she wanted the affection from her father as well.
But then also while reading it, it sometimes gives the dynamic that like the mother and the father didn't have that good of a relationship. So I was like, is it because the father wasn't, or none of them are really like well versed in like the mother's mental health,
Hmm.
or is it because the father is not a good character? But
I mean, I think that's valid. Like, you're right in the history of depression. I like how she touched on that. There are some things that I wish she would have expounded on more, but I do like that she included it and touched on like the history therein and how it looks differently for different folks. But the dad, I don't know. Like I felt like he was someone who was very business driven. Even though he loved his family, I don't feel like he prioritized them, and that ended up harming like all of them in different ways, including the mom. But I didn't feel like he was like a horrible person. I do feel like he treated Sade horribly. And okay, I might be lying. I might feel like he was kind of a bad person, but mainly because, especially with everything that happens to Jamila, I felt like the dad wasn't there. Before she even went away to school, he was like treating both of them unfairly. But I also felt like once she came back, especially after we learned that he knew and he had a foul about it, I feel like as a father, he failed to show up. And when he placed the blame on Sade, I feel like that was horrible. When obviously he's not the one who committed it, like, but I feel like the bigger part of the blame was on him because it didn't seem like he did anything to support her. He just relegated her to her room and expected for Sade to fix the situation. I don't know if you felt the same way, but that was my take.
yeah, and I guess that also plays into like the parental figures not really being a safe space for, these characters like come to and voice their like concerns, or these traumas that are happening in their lives. And uh from the teachers to the parents, even thinking of like Elizabeth's parent.
Can we talk about that though? Because where were the parents? Okay, like for real, they were only there when things were at the absolute worst that they could be. But it's like, other than that, where are the parents? Like, I feel like the teachers and the headmaster had entirely too much control.
Yeah, and it's not like they really they really did anything apart from like try to get back to like, let's get back to the day to day. Like they weren't really
Yeah.
trying to resolve anything. So it was sad that they like, it felt like none of them could really go to anybody.
I
um
know. It was just like, where's the money? As long as we got the money coming in, it's gonna be okay. Um, or that like internal protection for the boys, and how, which made me wonder if the headmaster had been a part of the fishermen back in his day.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting. I was expecting like a picture to come up and it's like the
Right.
headmaster in his class. That's what
Yeah.
that was the plot twist I was
Same.
expecting.
Same. Okay, so like as the story progressed, like we talked about some of the good things we really liked about it. Was there anything for you that you were like, I could have did without, or you would have like preferred had it been written differently?
Again, like going back to August's character, I think there were some like twists and turns in the story, but uh, particularly like finding out how August played into all of it, I was like, I don't really feel like it felt like a surprise. At least to me, didn't feel like a surprise. It kind of, I think it unfolded the way that like we had expected it to unfold. Which also I guess is bringing a question into my head. But first, I'm going to let you like, give where you felt like things could have been, or it wasn't really your favorite part of the book. But just in terms of Elizabeth and Augustus relationship, did you see it unfolding the way that it did unfold? Because that's one thing I kind of wasn't like surprised about as well. So August's storyline was probably the part of the book that I was just the least invested in, because I kind of, the way it happened is the way I saw it happening.
Interesting. I don't know if I saw it playing out that way. I was scared that August had like a bigger, darker role than he did. Not to say that what he did was light, but I definitely saw it being more just darker. I'll just say that I saw him going to the extreme, and that's not how it played out. But I would say like one thing that really surprised me is the scene with August, Jude, and Elizabeth in the pool area, and August's reaction that felt very inauthentic to me. I didn't believe it for a second. I just didn't see August reacting that way, especially the way that his relationship with Jude had played out. And just also his dynamic with Elizabeth, the way that their trajectory was going and how he was treating her. I just didn't like feel like it was authentic the way that like that scene played out.
Did you see him being a more like cruel in that scene, or?
No, I felt like he would have been more passive about it.
Mm,
I didn't really see him lashing out in defense the way that he did. Like that was surprising to me, especially I would have expected that. Now, not to give this away, but when the big incident happened and he like came a part of it, I would expected that anger to be in that moment opposed to finding out the news. Like it just felt like it would have been more genuine at that time. And like maybe it's because he found out what he found out that he felt like it was wrong and he had to defend. But I don't know. For me, it just didn't feel like authentic to his character at that point.
yeah. I also kind of, I guess I also struggle with August because one, it seems like he's trying to, which also is the same for like April's character. I guess knowing that they come from a background of like a well-to-do, keeping up with like the Joneses. It seems like they come from a very affluent family, and it seems like they struggle with trying to save face and trying to like keep up the pretenses. And be part of like the club, whatever that, however you want to take that, be part of the club. While also it seems like August seems to, I do believe that he did have feelings for Elizabeth. Like I feel like he did, and I feel like when like the things unfolded like they did, like he was hurt. But then also it's that struggle of also keeping up with the pretenses and like keeping, you know, the image of whatever status they have.
No, yeah, I get that for sure. I did feel like that was an inner tug he had, or even at that scene where Jude got to swim in the meat when he wanted to. And that's what I think for me that made it like feel inauthentic, because I was like, there's just been times where we've seen him just allow Jude to have his way, or kind of like not cower, but swallow a lot of emotions when it came to Jude and just be like, okay, it's Jude, it is what it is. So I was like, for him to lash out in that way, I was like, maybe. But I don't know, I just didn't see it that way. And I think another big scene for me that didn't, I won't even say it didn't feel authentic. I just didn't like the way it unfolded. So like how everything ended up coming together with Elizabeth, moment that everything happens in April's room until the end of the book. I did not like Elizabeth's storyline and the like road she took in the story. I don't know if you felt differently, but I didn't like it.
And agree. I'm like, I'm glad nothing bad happened, but still, like, did it have to happen this way?
Like it was a little underwhelming. I'm not gonna lie. I was like,
Yeah, I was all like, girl, this is where you were at the whole time.
yeah, that was it wasn't a reach because it made sense. One thing I would say about this book is like the things made sense, right? It's just I was like, I don't know if it was the best course of action, or I don't know if it was like worth the payout. That was my issue. I was like, I don't know if like everything that led up to this was worth the big surprise.
Yeah, yeah, it did kind of feel just a little. I think I'm putting it all on Augustus, but I think the reveal of it all was a little.
That's so funny because I don't have a beef with August. Like I don't. I liked his character. I did.
I know. I said Augustus. See, that shows how much I don't. I was like, I
I
really
know.
named August.
That's so funny. That's so funny. So speaking of that, like, how did you feel about the pacing of the book? Like all the way through from part one to the last part. Like, how did everything like flow for you?
And I'm not gonna lie. In the beginning, I wasn't completely um invested. I was like, where is this going? And I will say by like part two of the book, it really picks up, and then like it seems like that's when everything kind of happens like back to back to back. So, which I don't mind. I don't mind like a kind of like slower, like building up like these characters and the dynamics in the beginning. So I don't mind a slower beginning. Um, but for me, the beginning felt just a tinge slow.
Honestly, I think I feel a little differently because I think as someone who really loves like thrillers and just like what's going to happen, I don't mind a slow build. So I was okay with that. I think part one, I was okay because it was like unfolding. It's like what happened. You're getting to learn about the characters a little more. Part two, I was still engaged. Part three, though, for me, I was like, that's when I started to realize I wasn't as emotionally invested as I thought I would be. Because as things were starting to just like play out and everything was being revealed, I realized I was like, I don't really care what happens to that person. And I don't think that's like the reaction I should have been having.
Yeah, I think for me it was kind of like, oh man, how are we gonna clear Sade's
Mm,
name? Because it seems like she just gets caught up in like at
yeah.
first it's like Elizabeth and now this, and it's like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
Yeah.
how is she gonna clear her name and like get out of this? Because
Yeah.
like, and then you start second guessing because she is carrying like the secret that's kind of like like you said, it's alluded to, but we don't actually know what the secret is. You start to like second guess her as the, you know, as the narrator, as this main character. Like, what exactly should I be trusting everything that she's saying? I think by part three, I just had just a little bit of distrust in Sade, which kind of kept me in there too, because I'm just all like, so what is exactly happening here? How much does she actually know that she's not telling us?
True. Okay. How did you, without like giving too much away, how did you feel about the reveal of who the culprit was, what happened, and why? Like, so for me, I really felt like, though it wasn't unbelievable, it just felt like it came out of left field. I had a bunch of questions. Like, I had too many questions when it was all said and done. I was like,
no, I agree. It did feel less believable, and it also felt like it was. I said that I felt like all of the characters had a really good like story and like background. I felt like how everything ended up folding and how we figure out like what happened. I was just like, I feel like this is the character that we that we saw the lead.
exactly. Like, I would have almost preferred to be anyone else than that character, because that just felt, and even the reasoning
So yeah,
behind
you're
it.
just naming all the things that are pointing that I'm just all like, it's August's fault. This is all, it's
Yeah.
all these.
That would be more believable if it would have just been Sade. Like, it was, I don't know. It's just I don't know. The interactions with the police were always interesting. Like, I do like how she tried to like let them play out fully and for us to see how everything was transpiring. But in the end, I don't know, it was just like a disconnect for me, because I found myself thinking like, if we weren't going to discuss this book, would I have continued reading it or not? And the answer was, I was like, I don't know. Like, we may never know now because I did. But like, there was, and I can't pinpoint the exact moment, but there was some point where like, I just didn't care about the like conclusion. So I don't know.
Yeah. Honestly, if I was thinking about like where it I think the book could have ended, and I would have never known what happened to Elizabeth, because I feel like at some point the book became more than Elizabeth.
Yeah, for sure. For
And
sure.
yeah, so it became more than Elizabeth.
Yeah, so I guess that leads to like the natural place of like, just like your overall impressions of the book. Like, however you want to like rank it, but just like, yeah, your overall impressions, and then walking away from the book, like, what would be your recommendation for folks?
Overall impression, and even thinking about like the other books that I've read this year so far, I had a good time with this book. Now that we've been discussing the ending, I'm not sure if the ending was my favorite, but if I had to rank it like a 1 to 5, it's like a solid 4 for me. Like, I had a good time, and someone is like looking for something that's like a little thrilling, say, oh, try this one.
Okay, I like it. Let's see. I think for me, I think Farida is a good writer. Like, never gonna take that away from her. I feel like overall, it kept me engaged for the most part. I wanted to know like, where is this going? But like I said, at some point I did kind of like lose at least an emotional connection. Even though like I was like, I'm gonna see this book through. I didn't dislike it in that sense. But the reward, like the end payoff for me was just like, not exactly what I wanted. So for me, like, I usually do a scale of like, read now, read when you have time, or read when you want, or read now, read when you have time, or read if you want. And this for me was like a read when you have time. So for me, that's usually around like a 3. Like, I don't hate it, but I didn't love it. Like, it was cool. There's some other thrillers that I read that are better. I would even say, hate to say it, Ace of Spades was better, in my opinion. So this isn't one that I would like rush to recommend, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, thinking about on your scale, I would also say don't rush to read it, but I don't think you would be like
completely disappointed
Yeah. It wouldn't be a
if you
horrible
read
read.
it.
Like, you
Um,
can't read it, right?
yeah,
Yes.
it would be a good read.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely like for me. I love some good character development, and I just
Hmm.
feel like she really gave these characters like I felt like I knew who they were,
For sure.
and they
For
kind of lived
sure.
off the page.
Yeah.
So and I don't think the pacing of it was bad either. Like I was engaged when I was engaged. I was really engaged.
Yeah.
So, and I think the how she touched on, which we actually did we really talk about how she touched on essay in this book.
No, we
Um,
didn't do it enough. Let's talk about it.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I don't. I think that she specifically when I was reading this, I was thinking of. I don't know if you read the list.
Mm-mm. But I've heard
But
of it. Yeah.
yeah, I was thinking of like how which comparing how they both touched kind of like the same subject, and I think this is a lot more well done. um, just in terms of like um the way it navigates like the the perspective of like the victim and how it doesn't seem to be very like individualized. It's also like how the perpetrators are protected by like in this case like the school, like these systems, these like thoughts, how our perceptions. I think of the way that we perceived April, some of these characters who ended up like we ended up learning how they're kind of implicated or affected by this as well. That it becomes more than just, the perpetrator and the victim, but also this like community or this space that breeds, and protects this kind of behavior.
Agree. I do think the way that she depicted how it's institutionalized, how it's something that goes on across time, like the lineage and legacy of it, and how it's just how it doesn't die, right? Because even when it was stopped, it just took another shape and another form. And so I really, really actually did like her depiction of just like how unsafe you feel, how unheard you feel, and how it happens in so many different ways, right? So even if you take the situation of Persephone, right, that living threat and how just the threat of it made her feel unsafe and having to live with that, as opposed to someone like April, who was so indoctrinated within that culture, and how she handled it, which was much different than how some other folks handled it, and how she found her own way to kind of like rage against it. But in the end, she was still just suffering. And so I really was curious also, how did you feel about where Sade's and April's relationship ended up in the end? Because for me, it felt like, one, I don't think what Sade like said was as bad as how Sade felt it was. I felt like it came from like a genuine place, and I felt like April needed a support system, but she also didn't know how to interact with that. So I wish that their dynamic could have played out differently.
Appreciate that she gave like that perspective because especially like when we think of like the climate now of like we are talking especially like in like in pop culture in like the public eye and like this critique of like why don't people come forward and things like that. And um like just thinking of April's character and how like she's like the head of this like in girl crowd, and she seems to be like this almost like this figure, I don't want to say of power, but um in order to like keep like pushing forward like what she has to suppress with what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I think that made her character or their dynamic interesting is what I'm trying to say,
Mhm.
that I like appreciated that
Okay.
because it gave a
Yeah.
different you know view
Perspective. Yeah.
of
Because
everything.
not everyone responds the same or deals with trauma the same way. So I agree. I wasn't mad at it. If, like, again, it felt realistic, but like, I just wanted them to have, I wish they could have had a better resolution and more healing could have occurred, because, and it's maybe it's not fair for me to say this, but in some way I did feel like April failed Elizabeth. Um, And like obviously she was dealing with her own like traumas that she hadn't discussed. But and maybe that's not unfair because I feel like she chose her brother over um she chose Jude and Augustus over, and now you got me calling him Augustus, but she chose Jude and August, I feel like, over Elizabeth. And so that conversation there as well of just her role in all of it is like being in that system, but then also like women showing up for women. So April for me was probably the most no, not the most controversial character of all of them, but of like the girl characters, she was the one for me that I was felt most conflicted about.
And I feel like if everything had came out like with her brother and everything, also the way that it would have like maybe upended her, and I felt like it
Mm,
was also her kind of trying to protect like some sense of, because
yeah,
yeah, when and from the outside you think everything is perfect, everything is normal, everything is going right, and then when you realize like there's all this stuff going on that she's trying to
yeah,
like hold together, the sense of, which is funny, we're talking about like the headmaster and like all
yeah,
these adult characters trying to keep this normalcy, but it's also like, if August is found out, if all these things happen, how is she also like uprooted from whatever she's trying to hold
yeah.
on to?
Yeah, and but honestly, April's the big surprise for April didn't surprise me. She was
Really?
too Yeah, because she was too despondent when everything was happening. So I was like, something's up with her. Like her connection to Elizabeth surprised me when we got the reveal on that. But like her relationship with her ex and what she was hiding and holding, I saw that coming. Like I did see that coming.
Yeah.
Um,
I was so, because I'm specifically thinking of like when we get the background of the breakdown in Elizabeth in her relationship, and when Elizabeth, before everything, falls apart between them, when she
yeah,
confronts April. I was surprised. Actually, I'm not gonna lie. I was, granted, I'm trying to like say like, oh, April's not surprising, but I was surprised by
okay,
her reaction of
yeah.
being like, girl. Pretty much you're a liar. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was wild. That was wild. Yeah. For it to just be that was interesting. Yeah. So for me, I was like, she was kind of the most I felt conflicted about her in the end. Um Also another scene, like just totally random, but this kind of bothered me because I felt like she was being like Farida was being so intentional in the way that she was writing these characters and trying to write care and how they were showing up and persistence. But there was one scene, I don't know if you remember when Baz was in his room and he was talking about how defeated he felt and how he just wanted to give up on everything. And Sade was like, "Oh, okay, so you want to be alone?" And she just left him there. I remember reading that like, is he not here sounding like he wants to like unalive himself? And she's just like,
Yes,
"Oh, okay, I'll
okay.
talk to
No, I
you
got
later."
that too. I was very, yeah.
Yeah. I remember reading that being like, what? Like, okay, so yeah, I'm just making sure I didn't miss that. Oh,
No, I agree.
but also, yeah, that
It's
was
like, oh,
wild. I was like, Farida, I just felt like I was like, maybe that's me being overly sensitive, but I just felt like Sade dropped the ball in that moment.
yeah, I
I think
felt that like
another
a couple of times where it seemed like Baz or Basil needed
yeah.
more like support, and Sade was kind
Yeah.
of like, like, okay.
Yeah. Hopefully you figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting for sure. But to circle back to what you were saying, I do feel as if this book is very timely. Because I do remember in my notes referencing like a specific music mogul. And just I was saying like what happens when boys go unchecked and the type of men they can grow up and be. So I felt like this is something that like is not new, right? That's something that we know happens in every like economic level of life. Um,
Yeah.
but I felt like this was we just need more stories that highlight that lived experience as well, and how ingrained it is in our culture that so many people allow it to just happen. Like how many levels of protection there are in place as well that allow it. Because even Miss Blackburn,
Yes, I was
who
thinking of her when you were saying what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, like just her character. I feel like she got a hero's journey, and I don't think she deserved it. I don't know if you felt that way, but just because of how she was throughout the story, and then for her to now, granted, there was evidence of this or just hints that maybe she didn't approve of how things were going and she was going along to get along. But I felt like she got a little too much grace in the end for how she just swooped in and was kind of like the saving force for like our main character. And that like kind of really annoyed me. I don't know if you felt the same way, but yeah.
I don't know if I was particularly annoyed, but when she like comes in at the end and she makes it seem like that she was vigilant and she had been seeing what's been going on this whole time, and it's kind of like I didn't really like get that vibe while reading it. It seemed like that she was very complicit.
Exactly.
Yeah, there was no
Exactly.
shining moments where you felt like, oh, maybe she's just trying to like maybe hold on to her job or something. But
Yeah.
her
Like,
ending didn't match, yeah, her actions
right?
throughout the
Her
book.
story throughout.
Maybe when
She
like
was
that one time she takes them out into the town, but that's me giving grace.
right, exactly. She's just getting all the grace. I guess another scene, the last scene, that I felt like I don't know if you felt like it was useful. For me, it was like more I reflect on it, and at the time when I was reading it, I thought that it was impactful and I thought it may have been important to the entire overarching story. But like when I got to the end, I felt like it was pointless. And it was when they went into town and went to the internet cafe and the exchange there. I was like, was it just to demonstrate um the levels of perversion because of what the guy was saying about Elizabeth? But I thought that that cafe story would end up having a bigger connection to how everything came together, and it kind of was for naught.
Yeah, I was trying to. Yeah, there's really nothing that actually connected to. Now that I'm thinking, yeah, there's nothing that really connected to it, except for like change of scenery.
For us just to see the town and
For us
experience
to
it.
see the town, yeah. Because what the
Yeah,
only time they really leave the school is like when Sade goes to London,
yeah,
and um,
yeah,
they go into town. Like they go into town like what, twice? But
yeah.
yeah, both times they go into town. I don't think we really get anything from it.
No. And how did you? So we never really touched on it, but how did you feel about Jude's courting of Sade?
Yeah, the whole time, honestly, I was like clutching my pearls. Like it just gave like
Mm,
something every time you're reading their scene, you're afraid something, especially when they're alone, you're afraid something's gonna happen.
mm,
Which is I'm gonna give a kudos because I don't know if you had the same feeling every time you read their scenes, like
yeah,
and you read like the way Jude comes off the page, like he comes off creepy. um
yeah.
Yeah, he comes off creepy. The way that she describes the way that like Jude stares at her, and like the way people talk like about Jude. So when they're in scenes together, it's you're kind of like is oh my gosh, is something going to happen in the scene between the two of them? When things hit ahead between the both of them, like was there a moment where I like before when everything is like happening, is there a moment where Jude does kind of seem just a little bit like redeemable, speaking with like a drunken mind, or in I don't even want to say drunken, is it drunken, inebriated, some he's on something.
Yeah. I don't know, because I think at one point, I did feel as if Jude might have been redeemable until I found out Sade's history and the backstory therein. And for me, it was just like I was all hands off with Jude, because we just realized the level of monstrosity that he was. And so, yeah, that just, yeah, I don't know. How did that feel to you? Did that feel authentic? Did that make sense to you? How it all ended up coming together in that sense, the connection across Sade's life? Or. Did it not?
I think once, like in that scene, with Jude and Sade, like right before it hits the fan, and he kind of like, well, he ends up like saying a name that uh I think kind of then pieces it together. And then also it kind of, I think that scene explains like the way that um he like looks at Sade. But then also, if anything, maybe now I'm saying this, I'm like, oh, it might make Jude look worse. Because he, you would think that he would be all, he would say like, girl, like you're her, like you're like we were intimate, we were
Right?
together, you're her.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I thought that was interesting because of how it's not like they're distant cousins or something, right? So there's a stark resemblance. So for me, I was just always like, if it was that intense between them, like there's obviously a resemblance, or there should be, right? So like, how do you let this progress without, before that moment, in that inebriated or whatever state, how do you not before that moment, like you were saying, like call her out and be like, I know it's you, like why are you lying? I don't know, it was weird.
Yeah, and that says like that's also kind of sad because it's like okay, so like for all the people that kind of came up and be like, I remember you. Um, I'm just interested in the kind of relationships that her sister had. It's like when somebody be all like, "Oh, so and so, hey,"
Yeah.
like, and be like, "Oh, sorry, that's not me." Not
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you look familiar."
True, very true. So I don't know. It seemed as if in the description, it seems as if she had a well-rounded social life and like things were going well before the big event. Sorry. So I don't know. I think I agree with you that I really like the characters and that none of them were static and they were always evolving and growing. Um, sorry. But
Oh, you're fine.
then to step back and like we were just identifying, there was still some like flaws, and I don't know if those are character flaws or just like oversights on their end of just some things there was a bit of a disconnect. But overall, I still thought it came together pretty well, and I'm not mad that I read it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely. I don't know if I would forget that I read this, which is why I'm like it's probably like more than the three for me because I would still like at the end of the year put this in the better half of books that I read this year.
Okay.
But yeah, like I don't think it was. I don't think it was forgettable. There's some things I probably would still think about later as I sit with it more.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm not mad at that. I could see that. I don't know. I was trying to think of just thinking halfway through the books that I've read this year. I think this might be one of the more forgettable ones for me. I think that the plot line, the storyline, I think the importance of it, like, but as far as like if it'll stick with me, probably not, unfortunately.
Mm, that just means I need to up my selection because I
No,
think so far this year it's been a little bit questionable.
I mean, some writers, they just write and like it haunts you. Like I think
Yeah,
of
no,
The Street by Anne Petrie. The ending of that book still haunts me to this day. I'm like, dang, why did it have to turn out that way?
ooh, that's on
And
my list. That's on my
is
list.
it? Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a good one. And so for
yeah.
this one, like I said, by the time I got to the end, I was like, okay, I guess. All right. So
And I think
yeah.
I read this like the previous month had. I think the previous month in terms of reads weren't there were that was a forgettable month in terms of reads.
Okay.
So
Got it.
um so I don't think this book put me in a slump, but
Not for sure. It did not do that. It did not do that, thankfully. Yeah.
yeah, so I appreciate that. So I'm just like, it'll probably one of the memorable ones because it's like, okay, it kind of reinvigorated me to to not give up on reading for another 2 months.
you go. Yes. So I'm glad that it worked out in that sense then, for sure. But yeah, that's our
Yeah.
take on what Sleeping Girls Lie. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about it with me. It's been a lovely experience and just like getting to know you and such, and hanging out. So that's been cool. So thank you.
Yeah, good discussion. I appreciated your thoughts, our thoughts on where Sleeping
Yeah.
Girls Lie. You changed my mind on a couple things.
Uh-oh. Hopefully for the better. Sometimes I wonder if I'm overly critical. I was like, I do want people to like support these writers. But I also want our writers to be like putting forth the strongest work.
I think it was fair. It was fair. At least I didn't write it, but I know you're an artist. You're sensitive about your stuff, but
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, okay. So this is an unfair question for you, but Ace of Spades or Where Sleeping Girls Lie?
ooh, this is a tough one, and I read them very close to each other. So, ooh, I'm gonna have to say Ace of Spades. I'm gonna have to say Ace of Spades.
Ah, no.
Not yet. Even
But
though
yeah,
Ace of Spades is it Devin?
Devin. Yeah.
Yeah, his character, I was just all like, oh my gosh. We just
Why?
having the worst time. I was like, what did he do to
Oh, for
deserve
sure.
this? He was just
For
minding his business.
sure. Mm-mm. I guess in both cases, though, I do appreciate that she tried to cover like serious and important topics that need to be discussed. And so, and I like the fact that she does it in a school setting because that's something everyone can relate to.
Yeah.
And we've all experienced it. So go her. Anything else you wanted to share? I'm about to end the recording part, unless you want to say something else.
No. This was fun. We
Yeah.
can do it for another book.